keeps it from overstretching and bursting. Okay, so it's kind of like you tie a rope around a box, so it doesn't, you put stuff in there, it doesn't come apart. Okay, that's kind of think of it as a belt, but the protein you need to know that makes up the belt is what? Not cadherin, that's what holds it together. What makes the belt? The microfilament called actin. Okay, so actin makes the belt. What holds one belt to the other belt is cadherin. Okay, so that's the teeth like of your zipper. Okay, it holds the zipper together, it holds the belt together, but the belt itself is made out of actin or microfilaments. Okay, and think of it as a belt that kind of holds the cell together. Your desmosome uses two different proteins also. It uses, which one is the teeth, the zipper again?
Cadherin.
Cadherin. Okay, so it holds, a desmosome holds the other side of the desmosome together with the cadherins, but that has what type of microfilaments or intermediate filaments? Keratin. Intermediate filaments is also part of what? We talked about back, I think it was in 5.4. Doesn't give the cell structure, but it supports the cell. What we talked about the different organelles back in what? Cytoskeleton. We talked about the different organelles that doesn't give the cell structure, but helps hold the structure up, the cytoskeleton. These are essential in connecting the cytoskeleton around the cell. Okay, they're like a spot weld. So you put one here, and now you can anchor your proteins through. You put one here, and so as you put these anchors in the wall, now you can start lining up your cytoskeleton so it holds the cell in place. It also holds cell to cell together so they can't be pulled apart. So the cytoskeletons are technically hooked together, glued together in two cells so that it resists being pulled apart through these spot welds. Does that make sense? So if you only have half a desmosome and it's on the basement membrane, what do we call it? Hemidesmosome. Okay? And a hemidesmosome uses what protein to hold it to the basement membrane? Integrin. Okay? And then it connects to the cytoskeleton through keratin, which is an intermediate filament. Exactly. So you're going to have these, which are going to resist the cell being pulled off the basement membrane. So we have cells, tight junction, which are leak proof. You have adherens, which is your belt, kind of holds the cell shape. You have spot welds called desmosomes that connect to the organelle cytoskeleton, the organelle cytoskeleton, and then you have the hemidesmosomes that connects to the basement membrane, and then on the inside it connects to the cytoskeleton. Okay, so you have the cytoskeleton not only holding cell to cell, but you got it holding to the basement membrane to the cell. Okay, so it makes it much stronger, so it can't be, the cells can't be yanked apart and pulled off the basement membrane. How do cells talk to each other? Through gap junctions. And the gap junction uses what proteins? Connects in. Okay, and the only difference is an I and an O. Think of it this way: it connects in is one singular part. What is that? It's an I, right? One is or an I at the end. If you get a whole bunch of them together, it's now a connexon. It makes the whole through which it can communicate. Okay, so it connects in, makes a connexon. Does that make sense? So understand the difference between those two. What can happen if one cell is sick? Do you want to get the neighbor sick? Neighboring cell sick too? It closes off, exactly. Calcium fills up those connexons, up those holes, so that nothing can pass through. And pretty much like a submarine door seals itself off. That cell is then destroyed and a new cell comes in and takes its place through cellular division called
Mitosis.
mitosis. Very good. Exactly. So know the difference between a connexin and connexon. Know the different proteins that are used with each one of these or each one of these junctions. And then the last thing we really need to talk about are the membranes. Okay, we've talked about epithelial tissue, and we're talking about it now. We're talking about a membrane. Okay, you have 3 types of epithelial membranes and 1 synovial membrane. Okay, epithelial membranes are made up of what? Epithelial tissue and connective tissue. So when you have the 2 tissues together, you have epithelial membranes. Okay, and there's 3 types: mucus, serous, and cutaneous. Okay, the mucus does what? Lines the exterior, anything that's exterior surface of the body. Give me an example of an exterior mucous membrane. Nasal passage. Your throat, your mouth. What about the GI tract? Is the GI tract an external tube? Everything that goes in here, does it go into the body? It just passes through, we get the nutrients we want out, and then we let it go out the other hole, the other way. Okay. So it's a one-way tube. It's a mucus to the outside environment, so it's a mucus-lined tube all the way through your body. Okay. A serous membrane does what? Surrounds cavities. Exactly. A cavity is going to be what? Inside the body. Like give me an example.
Well, your heart.
Your pericardium, right? So pericardium is a cavity the heart sits in. Okay, so the membranes around the heart are serous membranes. Okay. And what about the lungs? Pleural cavity, right?
It's forever ago.
Well, here's one. Here's one. We have 2 major cavities in the body. What are they called?
The dorsal and the ventral.
Dorsal and the ventral. The dorsal is broken down into 2 cavities called.
The thoracic.
No, that's the ventral. What's the dorsal? The cranial and the spinal. Okay. The thoracic. Oh, sorry. The ventral is made up of the thoracic and the diaphragm divides them. What's below the diaphragm? Abdominal, pelvic. Okay, so those are cavities. Okay, are those lined with serous membranes?
Yes.
Yes. Your mediastinum, that's a cavity between the lungs. Is that lined? Yes. Pericardium is another cavity. So all these cavities inside the body that don't have any access to the outside environment are lined with serous membranes. Okay, and then you have the cutaneous membrane, also known as skin, which is not a mucus. There's not mucus, but it lines the outside of your body. Okay. And then what's the difference between epithelial membrane and a synovial membrane?
Synovial is just connective tissue.
Synovial is only connective tissue. Now, don't get synovial and serous confused. They both have liquids, but serous is an epithelial membrane. synovial is connective tissue only. Where do we find synovial membrane? Joints, exactly. So do you have any epithelial tissue in your joints? You have only connective tissue. Be able to identify and label these pictures on both 348 for your epithelial membranes and then on 349 for your synovial membranes. You can see all that blue in your synovial membrane. That's areolar connective tissue. On the ends of your bones is your hyaline connective tissue.